Dear listener, the light is soft and the house is still. The stories hidden in linen are beginning to breathe. A candle, a letter, a forgotten box. Let the next chapter unfold. The attic trunk had been brought down and placed gently on the wide oak table in the dining room, where the morning light felt clean and golden through the glass doors. The sampler inside it, folded and tea-stained, its colours soft with time, was now carefully unrolled across the table. Clara had laid muslin underneath to protect the fibres. Olivia had fetched her magnifier. Mo, arms folded and thoughtful, hovered just behind, mug in hand. Next to it sat Olivia's modern frame, her sampler stretched taut and bright on the stand, its newer threads glowing faintly in the light. 2 pieces, 2 hands, 1 pattern. Almost. The same blossoms, the same vines, the same spacing and shape, and yet the older one told a slightly different story. Clara pointed to the top border. This is stitched in the same grey blue we've been using. But look at the spacing. There's something ghosted underneath. Olivia leaned in, and there it was. Beneath the gold-stitched word, remember, faint but unmistakable, a row of shadowed letters, not quite stitched, not charted, just present, as though something once sewn had been pulled free, leaving only its memory behind. Mo narrowed her eyes. That's not a mark from the fabric. That's a thread memory. She was right. Where the threads had once pierced the linen, they had pulled the weave ever so slightly. The letters had left their ghost behind. Clara read them slowly. Isabel Thorne. The name hung in the air. None of them spoke for a moment. It didn't ring any bells, not from the village, nor from family trees or old stitching circles, and yet... I feel like I've heard of it before, Olivia murmured. Me too, said Clara. Lulu settled under the table with Peaches curled beside her, as if she too had a thought about it. Mo ran her fingers along the sampler's edge. She stitched this, or started it, but why did it end up here, in Threadwell? They were quiet again. Outside, songbird filtered through the half-open window, a soft breeze stirring the edge of the curtain. The whole house felt as though it was listening. Then Olivia's eyes caught something else. Look at the lower corner, she whispered. In the original sampler, nearly invisible in the faded stitching, was a second name. Not stitched in the same hand, more hurried, less refined. She reached for the magnifier. Clara tilted her head. Is that a signature? Mo squinted. Celia, 1983. Olivia blinked. That's my aunt's name. The silence now was different, heavier, thoughtful. Mo gently lowered herself into a chair. We need to find out who Isabel was and what this piece was meant to show. Clara nodded slowly. We're not just stitching memory anymore. We're stitching lineage. Olivia reached out and touched the edge of the old linen. Her fingertips brushed the faded letters. She was trying to remember something, she said softly. Or leave it behind, Mo added. Either way, Clara said, she didn't finish. Olivia looked down at her own sampler. I think we're meant to. Later that afternoon, the soft patter of rain tapping gently at the windows of Threadwell Cottage. It wasn't stormy, just the kind of persistent, whispering drizzle that makes everything feel softer and slower, like the day itself had wrapped a shawl around its shoulders. Inside, the three women gathered in the library. It wasn't large by most standards, but in Threadwell, the library felt like its own world. Shelves lined every wall, filled with books that smelled of leather and lavender, poetry and old glue. The lamps cast golden halos across the spines, and a fire crackled quietly in the grate. Peaches and Lulu were curled in matching armchairs, half listening and half dozing. They had agreed, if Isabel Thorne had once lived at Threadwell, or left her stitches here, this was the place her story would be hiding. Clara pulled a stool towards the tallest shelf. There are old parish books here, she said, and journals. I think the last owner before Olivia's family left everything. Mo ran her fingers along the row of cloth-bound volumes. There's something about that second name, she said, half to herself. Celia, 1983. That's not far from when your aunt bought the cottage, right? Olivia nodded. She said it came fully furnished and that she never changed much, even the curtains were here. It was Clara who found it. She had climbed the step stools to reach the upper shelves. As she leaned to one side, her hand brushed the edge of something stuck behind a loose board. A faint creak and then a papery shuffle. She leaned in. There's something back here. Carefully, she pried the narrow board aside and slid out a flat parcel wrapped in waxed paper. Inside, a slim cloth-bound book the colour of faded plum. The front was unmarked. They gathered around the small table as she opened it. Inside the cover, written in looping ink, were just two words. Isabel Thorne. Beneath it, a second hand had scribed, for remembering. Please don't finish it unless you're sure. Olivia drew in a soft breath. The first pages were filled with notes. Not full diary entries, just thoughts, reflections, lists of herbs, weather patterns, a rough sketch of a counted border design titled For the Quiet Days. They were tiny, neat diagrams for corner motifs, a candle flame, a spool of thread, a heart surrounded by stars. Then came the dated entries, sparse but marked by years in the margins. 1979, 1981, 1983, and then nothing. a long, silent gap. Clara turned another page. A pressed violet fluttered free. Mo caught it gently before it landed in the fire. At the centre of the book, stitched into the paper spine itself, was a folded square of linen, stitched in pale grey, the same design as the one in Olivia's sampler, but only half complete. Clara looked up. She started it in the book, before it was ever framed. That means this wasn't just a pattern. It was a record. A memory, Olivia added. Not just hers, someone else's too. She turned another page, and there, stitched lightly into the margin in tiny over-one crosses, was the name Agnes. No last name, no dates, just the name. A small symbol beside it, a single heart wrapped in thread. Clara sat back. We're not the first to stitch this story. Olivia traced the page with her fingertip. But maybe we're the first to listen to it. That evening, the rain had stopped, but the air still held its hush. The windows of Threadwell Cottage reflected the golden glow from within, lamps lit low, the fire gently burning, the kettle always close to warm. Olivia sat in the drawing room, her sampler stretched neatly across the scroll bars of her frame. The others were near. Clara working quietly on the border from her own piece, and Mo curled in a big armchair with Lulu beside her feet, darning a pair of well-loved house socks with more flair than necessity. Peaches had taken up her usual position on the third seat, watching Olivia stitch with half-lidded eyes. The house felt still, not silent, just watchful. And the linen responded. Olivia wasn't following a chart anymore, not really. The vines and the shapes moved through her like breath, each cross placed with care, but without thought, her fingers moving as if they already knew. She was stitching a space, a panel beneath the new border. It had been blank before, but now threads in slate grey and muted lilac formed shapes like scripts. At first it made no sense, but slowly it began to take form. Not just shapes, not just motifs, letters. Clara leaned in. Is that writing? Olivia nodded yes. Mo crossed the room slowly. Words? In the stitching? They're appearing as I go. It's not like backstitch. It's as if the pattern knows how it's meant to read. They watched, breath held. As Olivia stitched each cross, the words emerged. Not a printed letter, not inked or written, but shaped in blocks, like the old alphabet samplers, yet woven with intent. It was a message. And as the line formed, Clara read aloud softly. If you found this, then you'll remember one more than I could. Mo sat down. Isabel. They knew it instinctively. This was her voice. Olivia kept stitching. The words formed line by line, carefully placed. This house holds pieces of all of us. The threads do not forget, but I fear I might. The sampler is the map. What's stitched cannot be undone, but it can be understood. The words were old-fashioned, yet kind, direct, but gentle. As Olivia stitched the next portion, her hand faltered. Beneath the writing, forming in the lower corner of the panel, was a small stitched motif. A spool wound with silver thread, and next to it, in delicate stitches, a name. Agnes. Clara placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder. She was someone, Olivia whispered, not just a name in a book. Mo added, and Isabel was trying to remember her. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it settling gently in the room. Clara finally said, "It's not just a letter. It's an invitation." "To finish what was left," Olivia agreed. She looked down at the sampler again. There was more to stitch, more to come. But now, they had the beginning of a voice. And Threadwell Cottage, ever quiet, seemed to hum softly in response. The following morning arrived misty and cool, with the sky the colour of warm cotton and the faint smell of damp leaves drifting in through the open kitchen windows. Olivia stood at the Arga, gently warming 3 mugs with a splash of oat milk in each, while Clara tidied up the corner where they'd left the plum-coloured book from the night before. Mo had already disappeared into the sunroom, notebook in hand. There was a quiet industriousness of the cottage that morning, the kind that comes not from rushing, but from shared purpose. Peaches and Lulu followed the women from room to room like small, soft shadows. When they all finally settled back into the drawing room with their drinks and notebooks in hand, it was Clara who said what they were all thinking. If that was Isabel's voice, and she mentioned Agnes, maybe we can trace both of them. Olivia nodded, but not through stitching records. These wouldn't be kept anywhere official. Parish records, maybe, or land deeds. Mo tapped her pen against her mug. Or burial grounds. They looked at her. She raised an eyebrow. We're in a village? There's only so many places names can hide. She was right. By mid-morning, they had layered on coats and boots and tucked scarves around their necks. The rain had stopped, but the ground was soft beneath their feet, and the stone path glistened. The village church stood near the edge of the green, half sunken into a small hollow. Threadwell Parish, built of weathered flint and crowned with an uneven bell tower. Inside, the air turned still and quiet. No wind, no birdsong, just the low hush of old things being remembered. They walked slowly through the grounds. Clara found it first. Tucked behind a patch of overgrown rosemary and stone angel wings leaning forwards at a tired angle. The name was simple. Agnes Thorne. No title, no dates. Just there. Beside her, in a smaller, newer stone, Isabel Thorne, 1951 to 1986. Threads remember what hands forget. The quote made Olivia's breath catch in her throat. She stitched that, she whispered. She stitched those very words. Mo crouched down to brush moss from the edge of the stone. She finished it, or someone finished it for her. Clara's voice was quiet. They were family. Olivia nodded. Not just by name, by thread. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Mo stepped back. I think there's something we haven't seen yet. Clara turned. You mean in the sampler? No, said Mo. In the house. Olivia looked at her. Where? Mo tilted her head, thinking. Where the walls are thickest. Where the stitch count shifts just slightly. Like the linen, Clara said softly. Mo smiled. Exactly like that. Threadwell Cottage was not a place of accidents. Every room had been crafted with care. Beams waxed to a soft sheen, bookshelves recessed into walls, and paintwork so pristine it glowed in the morning light. Even the floors had a quiet elegance, warmed by underfloor heating and softened with heirloom rugs in misty blue and rose gold. But some doors, it seemed, were meant to remain unnoticed until the right hands found them. Mo had been tidying near the back stairs, a wide, graceful sweep of wood and glass. When she paused beside the antique case clock that stood in its own alcove, as she leaned to dust behind it, she noticed something strange. A faint groove in the panelling. Not a flaw, more like an invitation. Olivia, she called gently, could you come look at this? Within moments, Olivia joined her, the scroll frame still resting on its floor stand in the drawing room. Clara followed, embroidery hoop in hand. Behind the clock, Mo pointed to the seam. Feel this, she said. It's flush, but not decorative. Olivia examined it, then ran her fingers along the edge. There's something here. Clara leaned in, and just above the skirting, where the design of the wood dipped into a gentle flourish, she spotted it. A brass lever. Seamless, perfectly disguised. She looked at the others and then pressed it. A soft click. The panel eased open, revealing a concealed doorway. Behind it, a narrow vestibule. Not cold or dusty, but climate controlled and clean. The walls were lined in pale oak, and soft lighting flickered on from the recessed corners as they stepped inside. It's like it was waiting, Mo whispered. At the far end of the space, beneath a linen dust cover, stood a tall embroidery frame. Still upright, still tensioned, still holding a half-stitched sampler. Clara gently drew back the cloth. Olivia stood closer, breath catching. It's her stitching, she whispered. Isabel's. The same colour palette, the same tension. The linen had yellowed slightly with age, but the thread shone true. Dove grey, dusky mauves, pale antique blue. A threaded needle still rested in the weave, as though the last stitch had been paused, not abandoned. Next to the frame sat a beautiful lacquered sideboard. Upon it, a carved wooden box. Inside, neatly wrapped, silks and cottons, a silver thimble, a brass thread cutter in the shape of a crescent moon, and a dried sprig of rosemary was tucked beside them, tied with a pearl thread. Beneath the pane of glass, a note. Olivia leaned in. Written in Isabel Thorne's elegant hand. If I don't return to finish this, let the thread guide you. It remembers more than I was brave enough to see. Agnes knew, and I think you do too. Peaches let out a soft woof from the threshold. Lulu nosed past her, sitting primly beside Clara as if sensing something important had just been found. The three women stood in reverent silence. The scroll frame waited, poised in the centre of the room. Not abandoned, not forgotten, just ready. The secret room became their sanctuary. They didn't speak of it loudly or often, only in hushed tones and passing glances. But each day, just after breakfast, and before the rest of the world could intrude, they returned to the space behind the panel, drawn by thread, by memory, by something more. Olivia was the only one who stitched on the frame. It felt right. Her hands were steady, her heart calm. The linen was old but not fragile. The threads pulled true. As she worked, slowly, carefully, never more than a few crosses at a time, the pattern deepened. Not in shape, but in meaning. Agnes had left something behind. Not just a name, not just a story, but a presence. A gift stitched into the borders and folds of the sampler, waiting for hands willing to finish what had begun. That morning, Olivia had worked the upper edge, completing a delicate arch of ivy and bluebells. And just as she'd moved to secure her thread, something shifted in the weave. Not visibly, not magically, just subtly, like the linen had taken a breath. She paused. The others noticed too. Mo leaned against the doorway, arms folded. Did something happen? Olivia didn't answer right away. Her needle hovered just above the fabric. There's a new space, she said finally. It wasn't in the chart, but it fits. Clara moved closer, watching. What kind of space? Olivia narrowed her eyes. Like a window. A stitched opening. But instead of showing the garden or sky, it looks like it's meant to hold something. She threaded her next length of silk, the shade of soft silver grey, and began to follow the gentle cues in the linen. Bit by bit it appeared. A shape. Then a motif. Then, unexpectedly, letters. Not a message this time. A name. Agnes. And below it, a small stitched symbol. A stylized heart, enclosed by a ring of rosemary. Mo's voice was quiet. That was on the note. Clara nodded. Agnes marked her work. They watched as Olivia completed the final stitches of the motif, and then, barely audible, a faint click echoed in the quiet room. Not from the frame, not from the floor, but from the table. The wooden box that had sat sealed for days had released its clasp. Clara stepped forward first. The lid rose easily. Inside was something new. A folded piece of cream-coloured linen, still clean and wrapped with tissue. Beneath it, a bundle of threads wound on handmade wooden bobbins, labelled in Isabel's handwriting. And tucked beside them, as if it had been waiting for years to be touched again, was a small, wax-sealed envelope. No name, just a date. August 17th, 1983. Olivia's hands were steady as she reached for it, but she didn't open it, not yet. Instead, she looked at the sampler. Agnes's name rested now within it, permanently, tender. She was no longer just a trace in a book or a whisper in the thread. She had returned. They gathered close. Clara poured fresh tea. Mo lit the soft glass lamp in the corner. Olivia rested her fingertips gently on the envelope before breaking the seal with the slender silver thread cutter she'd found in the box beside it. The wax gave way with a soft crack. Inside, the letter was folded once, written in deep grey ink on textured paper. The handwriting was fine and slanted, but steady. Olivia read aloud. August 17, 1983. My dearest Isabel, if you are reading this, it means you have chosen to carry the thread forward. I never had the courage to finish. You always did. There are stitches I can't unpick. Memories I can't bear to lay bare, but they live in the linen. Nonetheless, you asked once why I kept returning to the same border, the same shapes and vines. It wasn't habit, it was safety. The sampler is not a record of beauty. It's a map of loss, of choices, of silence. My name may not be on any birth register, but it is stitched in that fabric, and through it, you'll find her too. If you finish it, do so with kindness and leave space for her name to remain. She wasn't a mistake. She was mine, and I loved her with every thread I had left. Olivia's voice caught. For a long moment, none of them moved. The only sound was the soft tick of the wall clock, and Peaches letting out a gentle, low sigh from her chair. Mo whispered she was talking about Agnes. Olivia shook her head slowly. No. Agnes wrote the letter. Isabel was the one who finished it. But this is Agnes writing to Isabel. Clara leaned in, pointing to the line. My name may not be on any birth register. She was never recognised, but she left this for someone to remember her. And for Isabel to stitch, Mo added, even when it hurt. They sat in silence again, the letter resting on the table like a bridge between past and present. Olivia stood slowly and moved to the frame. She looked at the sampler, at the border Agnes had started, the name she'd signed beneath, and the tiny heart and rosemary symbol stitched in grey. and below it, just space. She didn't speak. She only picked up her needle and began to stitch. She didn't chart it first, didn't overthink. Each cross she placed wasn't guesswork. It was recognition. A name long kept in silence, now allowed to surface. The thread she chose was deep plum, quiet, certain. And as the name formed in soft, balanced letters beneath Agnes's, Isla. Clara blinked hard. That must have been her daughter. She wasn't forgotten, Olivia whispered. She was stitched into the story. Lulu nosed her way under Mo's hand, sensing the quiet ache in the room. Mo smiled faintly. They weren't witches because they brewed potions. They were witches because they wove memory into fabric. And made it last, Clara added. The letter would be preserved. The sampler, when finished, would be framed and hung, but not in a gallery, in Threadwell, where it had always belonged. That afternoon, the light changed. It wasn't sudden, just a soft shift, like the cottage had exhaled. Shadows settled differently on the floor. The glint on the picture frames deepened. Even the air, always faintly scented with tea and something floral, now carried a subtle note of rosemary and rain-damp wood. Clara noticed it first. She'd gone to fetch the basket of threads from the corner and stopped, standing quite still. Does the light look warmer to you? Mo paused, mid-sentence, glancing up from her notes. Yes, it's like golden hour, but earlier. Olivia didn't speak. She was at the frame again, stitching the final curve of the scroll motif that curled like a tendril of memory through the centre of the sampler. She could feel it. The sampler was almost complete. There were maybe 40 stitches left, if that, but each one felt weighty, significant, like the last few pages of a beloved book. You want to know how it ends, but you don't want it to be over. Clara set the thread basket down and moved closer. What's next? She asked softly. Olivia's hands paused mid-air. There's a space, she said. On the lower right. It's shaped like a gate again, but smaller, framed in vines. Mo stood now too. Peaches trailed behind her, like a furry little shadow. Maybe that's the final piece, she said. A way out, Clara offered. Olivia threaded her needle. Soft, silvery sage this time. The exact hue of new leaves in spring. She stitched the gate slowly. The design was simple. An arch, a slender latch, ivy trailing over the top. But it didn't close. When the last cross was placed and the motif showed a gate half open, not swinging, not forgotten, just gently ajar. Clara leaned closer. There's something behind it. Indeed, barely visible, but forming in the background, a shape emerged, a faint silhouette, the suggestion of a figure. Not charted, not instructed, but stitched, stitch by stitch, by Olivia's own hands. A girl. Young, hair caught in invisible wind, arms raised as if she's reaching for something not yet seen. Mo's voice was very soft. Isla. The light through the windows changed again, brighter, clearer, and in that moment the cottage felt whole. Like something long fragmented had realigned, not with fanfare or fireworks, but with stillness. Peaches let out a long breath and settled into her usual corner. Lulu followed with a dainty sigh and rested her chin on Clara's slippers. Olivia sat back. The sampler was finished. But instead of feeling over, it felt like a beginning. Clara placed a hand gently on Olivia's shoulder. You brought her back. No, Olivia said, her voice calm. She was always here. I just listened. They didn't need to speak after that. They left the scroll frame standing, its linen now filled edge to edge with ivies and figures, flowers and hidden names. A map, a memory, a gift. And as they walked back into the main room of Threadwell Cottage, the light behind them shifted once more. Not fading, just changing. Like the day had turned a corner and something new was waiting just ahead. 2 weeks later, the sampler still sat on the scroll frame in the sunroom, catching the light through tall glass panes and casting faint shadows on the oak floor. Olivia had resisted the urge to frame it straight away. She said it needed a little time to rest, to breathe, to settle into itself. The cottage was quiet that morning. Peaches was snoring delicately under her blanket, while Lulu kept watch by the hallway, ears alert. Then the bell at the gate rang. It was rare. Threadwell Cottage wasn't somewhere you stumbled across. It was tucked well beyond the edges of the village, surrounded by fields and a long beach-lined lane. Mo glanced up from the kitchen, brows raised. Expecting anyone? Olivia shook her head. Clara opened the door. A woman stood at the gate, mid-60s, elegant but worn around the edges in a bookish sort of way. She wore a slate wool coat, a soft scarf, and carried a well-used satchel. She didn't look lost. I hope I'm not intruding, she said, her voice clear and warm. My name is Marianne. I think I may have something that belongs here. Clara ushered her inside. Tea was made. A chair was drawn up near the fire. Lulu approved instantly and sat by her feet like an old friend. I saw the sampler, Marianne explained, cupping the mug of tea. Not in person, through a textile conservator I used to work with. There's a quiet email list for exhibit historians, world travels. She unfastened her satchel and took out a small, wrapped bundle. I recognised the motif in the corner, the rosemary and heart. I'd seen it before. She unwrapped the cloth. It was a small sampler panel, about 6 inches across, simple but carefully stitched. Soft grey on pale linen, with tiny forget-me-nots in each corner. In the centre, she was more than silence. In the lower right, the rosemary heart. It came to us anonymously in 1984, Marianne said, part of a local guild exhibition. One that encouraged deeply personal pieces with no obligation to identify the stitcher. I read the phrase again last week, she continued, and I thought, I need to bring this here. She took out a second item, a small folded card. This was tucked inside the same package. I read it then, and once more before today, but it was never meant to stay with me. Clara accepted it carefully and passed it to Olivia. The handwriting inside was soft and slightly faded. For whoever completes her work, you are not finishing a story. You are making space for it to begin again. No name, no date, just those words, quiet and sure. Marianne stayed only a short while longer. She declined a second cup of tea. I just needed to bring it home, she said gently. At the door, she glanced back once at the sampler, still on its frame in the sunroom. She mattered, she said simply. And now, she always will. The gate clicked gently behind her as she walked back down the lane. A week later, the sampler was framed. They chose a wide mount of soft cream and a frame made from weathered oak, warm with a silvery edge. Nothing flashy, nothing that shouted, just beautiful, honest materials that let the stitching speak. They hung it in the heart of the cottage, just opposite the fireplace, where the light from the windows would gently shift across it through the day. Clara stood before it with a cup of tea, her eyes resting on the figure of Isla, stitched with the grace and certainty into the border. You know, she said softly, it doesn't feel like the end. Olivia nodded. It's not. It's just been brought into the light. Mo returned from the village post office with a small bundle of mail and a smile. Another note from the History Society. They want to know if we'll write something for their summer bulletin. Clara smirked. As long as they don't call us witches. Mo raised a brow. Speak for yourself. They all laughed quietly. Lulu rolled onto her back in approval. Peaches, dignified as ever, remained in her patch of sun like a cushion come to life. Later that afternoon, Olivia returned to the sunroom. The scroll frame sat empty now. Fresh linen rolled across its bars, smooth and white. She hadn't yet decided what the new project would be. Not a sampler, not at first. Just something small, gentle. She traced the edge of the fabric lightly with her finger and then reached for her needle case. No ghost stirred. No mysterious motifs appeared. Only quiet. But she could feel the thread waiting to tell the next story. Not because something had been forgotten, but because something had been remembered so completely that there was room now to begin again. And so, she threaded the needle and made the first stitch. Dear listener, you have followed the threads all the way to the final stitch. Thank you for spending time in the quiet stillness of Threadwell Cottage, where the past found its voice and the story found its ending. Wherever your next story takes you, may your hands stay busy, your heart stay calm, and your threads never tangle.